I met with the chief, you know what I mean, talked to the chief about everything, and they wanted to continue to work and do some partnership. I started partnering with Eastern Michigan University. We were talking about policy change, and then we started fighting it, like, to really get the 8 can't wait, you know, and different things to protect our citizens and protect the people in our country from not getting, you know, profiled and potentially harassed by police. So we started having those conversations, right? And then so many of these videos started going around TikTok, the news, and I was on every news station in Detroit. So everywhere I went, police officers were pulling up on me, saying what's up, taking pictures with me, talking on their bullhorn. Until this day, like, I still get their respect, you know, and it was amazing because I'm like, you know, you have a city who's been through a lot of stuff. Our city was burned down in 1967. It was burned down because of a lot of civil unrest. There was some cops who brutally took the lives of some unarmed black men, and it was bad. There's a movie about it. It was horrible. So after that, the city got burned down. There was a lot of racial tension. But after that, due to new leadership, the police chief and, you know, so many other, I can't remember specifically, but there's a lot of leaders who came in and revamped and reformed the policing system in Detroit to make sure that any racist cops who profile, you know, don't have a place in here. It wasn't perfect. There's still a lot of things that needs to happen, but that's when I stepped up, and they invited me to say, you know what, Trey, we do have a lot of loose ends in our policing. Like, are you willing to help and speak for the community, on behalf of the community, and not just be the voice for my community, but one of the voices, you know? So that's how that happened, and it opened up a lot of amazing doors for me to be able to just build that bridge between the community who wants to fight for justice, but at the same time, you know, build up our community. Because we need, like, for us, our focus is providing better education, bringing funds, bringing jobs into our city, not tearing things up. Because it's, you know, if you look at Detroit, it's a huge city and it's already been, you know, abandoned. So our goal is to bring our city's economy up, and it's on the rise right now. So with that being said, that's like a good answer of, like, how I got the respect of Detroit police. You know, what up, Sydney? What up, Jacob? And then, you know, so here's the next thing I want to talk about right now. All right, so right now I want to talk about, should we abolish the police, and do I think we should abolish the police, right? So with that being said, I feel like the history of policing, it was to, if I'm not mistaken, it was to guard businesses, and it was to protect businesses from, I guess, being, you know, being attacked or whatever, right? It was originally, if you go back in, like, history further back, I can't remember the exact date, but it was originally to protect businesses and stuff like that. So eventually, during the time of segregation being illegal, and you had a lot of the slaves running away, a lot of the policing became to hunt down and track down slaves. So that's like a little bit of the history of why, you know, the tension between minorities and police is the way that it is, right? And I'm not one of those people that's saying, oh, all people are racist, white people are, or police are, like, I'm not that kind of person, right? So I know people gonna see the first thing I said and come here and start attacking me, but just listen to what I have to say, right? Like I said, I got the commander, second position officer in Detroit's phone number. Like, I text him occasionally. Like, I meet with the police in Detroit. So I'm just giving you a little bit of context, right? So somebody said it was a slave patrol, right? So that's just the history. So then as you fast forward, you have so many different things that was put in place in America that that usually protected, you know, certain demographics of people, but it came at a disadvantage to minorities. So you already have this distrust. You already have minorities with this fear and, you know, this distrust. And then you already got the police, you know, kind of like, okay, this is what I got to do, right? So fast forward, you got the war on drugs, where Ronald Reagan, who was politically like a figure in our country and in America, right? He allowed guns and drugs to be imported in our communities, in African American communities, And, you know, a lot of the money that was made off drugs was funded for war. So you can look that up. Look up the war on drugs, Ronald Reagan, right? And a lot of people turned a blind eye to it. And I grew up as a byproduct of that in my neighborhood, to where it was huge amounts of guns, huge amounts of like all that, right? And I had to fight for my life until I got out of that. And I thank God that I'm alive to this day. So I was a byproduct of the war on drugs. So when you look at that, you had drugs imported into minority communities. And then you had like things like, what was it? I'm trying not to say too much because I don't want to get demonetized. But you had, you know, a certain drug in a black community and then a certain drug in a white community. But the people in a black community would get, like, I think it was like 3 times the sentence as the drug in a white community. So like I said, I'm trying not to get into specific details because, you know, YouTube monitors this stuff. So with that being said, you had so much profiling going on in the communities, and then it created a further distrust, right? So then you got the stop and frisk laws that popped up. And, you know, I've been a victim of this. Like, there's many times that I've been driving, walking around. I done got pulled out on. Officers done rolled up on me, screaming at me and saying I fit the description of a criminal. And I'm like, yo, I work hard. I'm a father, husband, you know, like go to church, like all that stuff, right? And I'm like, I'm not a criminal, like, you know. So been a victim of that. And then, so that's just historically, right? So fast forward, when you look at cities like Detroit, you know, when you look at cities like Detroit has adopted so many different things to kind of reform and combat that. So the short answer is no, I don't think police should be abolished. But when I look at what happened in Detroit, policing was reformed, meaning that if our city is 84 or 82 to 84% black, our police chief became a black police chief, and majority of the policing in Detroit are black people from that community, which is important, right? Because if you got, like, for instance, there's an officer who who's my neighbor. So for her, she lives here. So if she lives here, she knows some of the faces, she patrols some of these areas, so she's not about to go up and get scared because somebody got a do-rag on or they got their shirt off and they walking and sagging. She's not about to be like, oh, let me run up on this person and choke them out, right? So for her, she's aware that that's like something that you see a lot in the community, in the inner city community, right? Versus if you have people who live in the suburbs and they have a completely different experience in the suburbs, and then they come to police inner city communities. For them, they don't understand how the communities work. They don't understand who's a target, who's not a target, who's a threat, who's not a threat. So they get thrown in, and there's this trauma, there's this PTSD, which makes it harder for them to do their job in a way that's successful. And I believe that's why you look at Detroit, and Detroit was one of the only cities that didn't have any sort of major damage or any major civil unrest that destroyed the city because of, you know, the reform. And you got some people in Detroit that's trying to overthrow the chief, overthrow the mayor, which I've tried to have conversations with those people, and, you know, I haven't got really any good answers. I mean, I'm still open to dialogue, but for me, I'm more about having conversations. Listen, when I say I talked to the chief of police in Detroit for like 2.5 hours with his right-hand man, like, for me, that's so powerful because he listened, he gave me his time, he heard me out, and we have a ongoing relationship. So we're talking about how to get more young African Americans in, you know, police uniform to police the city, because that's very important, right? So then you have more, you don't have just all white police in a black community, because when you look in the suburbs, from what it seems like, it doesn't seem like the suburbs usually struggle with these issues. So, you know, and you do have a lot of like crime when you look at like low income suburban communities. Like, you know, you got like a big amount of drugs, you got like a drug epidemic and stuff like that, but you don't really hear a lot of reports on the news of like brutality and stuff like that. I'm sure it happens, right? Now I hear a lot of people saying it happens, and there's a lot of those reports out there, but you don't really hear about the civil unrest with that, you know? So when it comes to minorities and African American communities, there's a lot of history with it, which makes it pile up. So when things happen, it's an outburst. So I think the best thing that, you know, can happen instead of abolishing police is have different leaders like myself from the community partner with the police to be a bridge and to have those conversations to figure out how to, bring more people from the community to become officers, and then, have more people who are officers get that training and that racial training and that diversity training and even trauma training. Because as an officer, if you see and witness a lot of trauma and then you got to wake up the next morning and go do your job, like, that's tough. So that's one thing that we're working on right now. A lot of work is not easy, but that's why, like I said, I'm not one of those people who are just like, oh, it's either this or that. It's either racist police or abolished. It's way more deep and way more levels of that, right? So when people try to come at me with those arguments, it really doesn't do anything, because, like I said, for me, it's so much more to it than just that, So with that being said, like, I'm excited to see what we do in our city. We really believe that we're going to be an example for the rest of our country and the rest of our world, potentially, with everything that we're doing in our city of Detroit. And it's a really beautiful situation that we're in. And I think if we have more stuff like that, there will be a lot more peace between people who come from the hood or people who come from the suburbs. If there was more communication, more of a bridge, more of a conversational, like, just exchange, to where people got to know each other's story, where people got to talk. The problem is when people are so segregated and, people are pushed out or not welcome or misunderstood, then, you know what I mean? Like, then that's when those problems come out of miscommunication. I have so many conversations with kids from the suburbs who grew up Republican, or the ones who want to talk and actually have conversations. I got friends who are millionaires. I got friends who are in the hood. So I have a lot of conversations, which is usually the solution to a lot of the misconceptions and misinformation, So, like I said, I'm excited to see where that go. I don't think we should abolish the police, but I think we need to make sure that police are held accountable. And there are things like the 8 can't wait, where, like, you gotta ban chokeholds. You can't shoot at moving vehicles. You have to do de-escalation, to where you can't just shoot at somebody or choke them out and take their life just because, right? You have to do de-escalation, meaning give warnings, then use, your hands. And if you can't do that, use a taser. Or last resort is using your weapon or taking a life, right? And sometimes things happen so fast. But in Detroit, there's times where the police had to take somebody's life, right? And I was hurt because nobody deserved to have their life taken away. But at the same time, I wasn't in an uproar about it, because we seen videos that the people were obviously attacking the police and they tried their best to de-escalate. But once it started to escalate even more from the suspects, and then they had to take it in further measures. You know what I mean? So, yeah, so there's so many different things that we can do to make sure that these things don't happen. And that's what I'm about, because crime is real. I live in a city where there's a lot of crime, and crime is real, and we do need some sort of policing. But I think maybe we should have a thing like social work at a lower level, to where if somebody's homeless or if they're mentally ill and they're breaking into something, to where they get proper treatment and don't just get their life taken. Or if someone's like high or on drugs or drunk and they're starting fights, to where, like, a social work will come out with some sort of protection, but not like a military unit. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, there's so much more that can be broken down. So if y'all got any more questions, drop it in the comments. Like this video. Thanks for watching, and I am out.